ready, we'll call the meeting to order. Higher Ed Budget. Today marks 2nd. My son's adoption day. We got him 32 years ago, so we're celebrating today. So, yeah. Okay, thank you all for being here today and kind of this extra meeting. I've tried to get around and speak to a few of you to let you know why we're meeting. The purpose was because as Jill and Shirley came out with our recommendations, it seemed like there were a few things that were confusing. We had a very, let's just say our meeting when we did our recommendations had a lot of moving parts. And so there was a lot of things flying around. And so this meeting is just to make sure we are all on the same page and understand what exactly we passed and what are our recommendations. So Shirley, I think I'll call on you to, there's really 2 things in particular that we're going to talk about. The first one is it has to do with the funding for the tiered and the non-tiered. And it's a little bit confusing. And we came up with language that I think is going to make it more clear. And so Shirley, would you like, or Jill, you want to, yeah, let's go ahead and pass that out. This should make it more obvious what we did. And I want to make sure if anyone has any questions that we get your questions asked and answered actually. So I'll give a quick overview, but Jill or Shirley, either one, whoever feels like, while they're passing out, if you remember, there was $15 million extra for special projects for the community colleges. And we ask 11.88, so we'll just say 11.9 million to be put into to fund all of the underfunded community colleges and to hold harmless any community colleges. So basically we're closing the gap, we're filling the gap, we're funding everyone completely, if you understand. But I think some of the confusion came in that I think you all got this sheet. And so, you know, there's tiered and non-tiered. There's some schools that are overfunded on one side and underfunded on the other side. So what our intention is to combine, like if there's one school that's overfunded and underfunded, combine those 2 accounts, see what they come out in the end. And that's the final column. If there's a school that's overfunded on 2 sides, then we hold them harmless. If there's a school that's underfunded on 2 sides, we go ahead and fund both of them. But if there was a school that was mixed, we combine those together. And that's where we got that 11.9 million. And so to do that, we had to come up with some different language. So do you think this is a good time for one of you to make an explanation, or do you want, what do you think is the best thing to do? Yep, what we passed out. Okay, Shirley will give you kind of a little more explanation. I think it's good to hear it from different people because Shirley and I sometimes explain things different ways. So I think it's good. And then, but please, if you have any questions, be thinking of your questions. Okay, thank you, Shirley.
Okay, so the first thing we did was delete the sections in the bill for the tiered and the non-tiered funding. The tiered was just under $63 million. The non-tiered was just under $84 million. We added the 11.8 million, which, as the chair explained, came from the 2-year projects, 2-year college projects. So when you take those 3 line items and add them up, that's where we got the 158 million that's in what a new fund we're just calling the 2-year college operating grant. So that's where that money came from. And then the board would calculate the total amount to each college that they should receive in tiered and non-tiered, and are able to fully fund both of them, but in a combined account, allowing no college to receive a lower amount than the combined total they received last year. So that would be held harmless. They're not going to receive less than last year, but combining the tiered and non-tiered. And then there's a proviso there again that talks about not receiving less than they did for the tiered and the non-tiered. And then the section there that says on page 162, delete items 17 through 32. That is the section in the bill that was the 15 million for the projects for the 2-year colleges. And then if you want to stop there, do you want me to explain?
Let's stop.
Okay.
Let's stop there we'll just talk about the funding. We can talk about the working group in just a minute. So does everyone understand that that's where we're at, and understand that's what we talked about last time? Representative Rajas.
I believe so. So do we, and I don't have that sheet in front of me, do we have any of these schools that, I guess, is every school going to get dollars? When we do this, we don't have one school that's going to get more than the combination. You see what I'm saying? In order to keep people whole harmless, are we going to have some of our bigger community colleges that are still going to gain $1 million or $2 million more than what they should to kind of balance it out, or do we have any schools like that? I don't remember.
So, okay, I'll just give you an example of Wsu Tech, which is one, it's a big one. So
like that, or Johnson County, just
yeah. So, I mean, looking at this, Wsu Tech was, they were underfunded in the tiered by 2.8 million. They were underfunded in non-tiered by 2.9 million. So for the first time, this committee has decided anyone who is underfunded, we are going to close that gap. We're going to fund every school completely. So yes, Wsu Tech would actually be getting almost 5.7 million. That's what they're really due according to the formula. So they'd be getting that. Now, Allen County Community College, they were overfunded in tiered by 800,000 and something. They were underfunded and non-tiered by about 400,000. So their net that they're going to receive will be 467. So they're held harmless with the tiered, but they were overfunded on part. So we're taking those two balances and combining them to figure out how much they're going to get.
I guess that's want to make sure I fully understand that those that, in a sense, were overfunded, that is going to be, in a sense, dumped over into the other one, tiered or non-tiered. So again, asking, none of these institutions are still going to be overpaid, if you will. Everybody simply be made whole.
Okay. Well, there are some schools that have been overfunded. On both sides.
So what happens?
Howard County, they are going to be held harmless. They are going to get what they got last year.
So they will come out of this. Then what? To keep them whole harmless, then they will continue to get more funding than what the formula says they should. Is that
okay? I'm glad you asked, because that's true for 2023. That's the whole point of the next section, which is the working group, that these schools understand they have been overfunded for a long time, and it's time. And what I understand, everyone is in agreement. We're going to have a working group to figure out how do we get back to actually funding the formula the right way. That's what so I'm glad you asked. They're being held harmless. They're getting extra this year. There's no doubt about it, as they have in other years. But now everyone agrees it's time to balance everything out and try to get back to actually executing the formula the way that it was meant. And that's why we are going to have the working group.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we kind of had that explanation.
Mhm.
I thought that was the case, so we all fully
I want
understand
everyone to understand.
how we're going to move forward, and then we'll have more discussion on the next phase. But I think without having an understanding as you did, we have the three kind of different
Yeah, there's three.
how we're trying to work on that.
Mhm.
That may have a discussion moving forward with this.
That's a great point. Yeah, Representative Wassinger.
And the reason we're doing that is because we don't feel like we should be cutting all their funding right now. We're giving them, this is the warning. We're going to do this. We're going to get into this. And when she discusses the working group, we understand that this is how we're going to implement. And the decision is whether it would be 2 years. I mean, that's what we're trying to get to. So everyone knows ahead of time. We're okay now, so we can figure out what we need to, if we need to adjust for 2024.
Sure. No.
Some of it may include their tax mill levy. You know, they may have to make some adjustments because they know it's coming. And that's another reason we don't want to cut them off just like this, because there's some adjustments that might need to be made. Okay, to the working group. Okay, for about the funding piece, does anyone else on the committee have any questions? Understands? Okay, so then the next piece is also on the same piece of paper. It's about the working group. I think that was clear. We didn't change anything. Jill is going to make an explanation about that.
So the reason I asked thank you, Madam Chairman. The reason I asked her to include this is I had failed on the first round of information that you got that had the working group. I forgot to get the most recent version. So I gave you a version that was 2 behind. So from what you saw last week, the only changes are that the working group would be limited to not more than 4 meetings. So that's in the second to the last proviso, or third to last proviso, excuse me. And then in order to organize, because we always wonder, well, who starts this? How does this get organized? It just reflects that the chairperson of the House Higher Ed Budget Committee would schedule the first meeting. So, basically what they could expect is that that chairperson would send out a notice that says, we're going to meet on X day to organize, and then it would go from there. The group would then discuss amongst themselves how they would have future meetings. And I'd be pleased to stand for questions, but those are the only 2 things that were changed. It's still a 9-member working group, and it's listed there how that 9 members are divided out there.
Okay, anyone have any questions about that? We just needed to make sure, because that's, I think, what we explained, but when you actually got something written, it was a little bit different than that. Question? Representative Rogers.
Thank you. Okay. Just so I guess so I understand, and maybe everybody else does. Thought this was a group to look at tiered, non-tiered. What I'm saying is recommendations to the 2023 legislature on funding for community colleges and technical colleges. So really, we're opening it all up. Is that what I'm reading, or am I reading too much into that? I thought we were going to do a working group to look at moving in 3 years or something to get in line and try to find a mechanism to fully fund the tiered, non-tiered. What I'm saying, though, with this language is you're opening it up to all funding of community colleges and technical colleges. My question, am I reading too much into that?
No, I appreciate the specificity that you're wanting, and I don't disagree. I mean, when I read that, I'm thinking we're figuring out how we're going to get to funding the formula with the tiered and non-tiered. That's what I see, but you're right. That's not, as an attorney, I appreciate words, every single word matters. And so,
Well, Madam Chair.
Yes.
As you said earlier, something about maybe community colleges have to look at some of the taxing authorities that they have.
Mhm.
But yeah, in technical schools, it's a little bit different. So that's my question is, as you look at this committee, is it much broader? Are you going to do a deep dive into all of the funding mechanism for community colleges and technical schools, or should there be language in there specifically saying that this committee is simply working on tiered, non-tiered?
It's a great question, and I appreciate you saying that. The only reason I brought up that taxing was to make the point that doing it in 1 year is maybe not a good idea. We need to ease it in. But I did bring that up. My intention with the working group is to figure out how are we going to ease in the tiered and non-tiered so that we fund it according to the formula is my intention. If we can, we can do a new recommendation. I mean, we can change this language a little bit. We can vote on it. We can change it if we need to, if we'd like it more specific. No issue.
I bring that up for discussion. Thank you.
No issues there at all. Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question probably for you, or potentially a motion. Could that be eased by just deleting "and technical colleges," or should we consider just rephrasing that one sentence to say for tiered and non-tiered?
Yep, thanks. And I think Jill says she has an idea, so let's hear that.
So what I was going to suggest to implement Representative Raj's idea is after funding for community colleges and technical colleges, we could just say concerning the post-secondary tiered technical education state aid and the non-tiered course credit hour grants to tie it to that.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay, second. Okay, great. Is there any discussion on that? Yes, Representative Wynn.
And thank you, Madam Chair.
Uh-huh.
So the intent is to make a recommendation. It's just not to review.
It's to make a recommendation. As you know, though, in a working group, it's not binding to the legislature. It'll make a report to the legislature, and then the legislature will be the one to decide.
That adds clarity.
Okay.
This group,
Yes.
when you come back with something else, then we'll have to adjust
Right. Exactly.
that, if you come back.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Any other discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? No? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Did I vote? No, I didn't vote. No, I didn't vote. Okay, I'm going to bring this up. So Jill, I also have a question because since we're going to change this just a little bit, I don't think the legislature or the Board of Regents intends to make any expenditures for the working group. You spoke about that. So I don't know if we should change that. The language doesn't say we have to or we must or anything, but should we keep it the way it is, even though there's no intention of expending anything? What would your recommendation be there?
So I think if what is typical in this, if your intention is that no one gets paid, even though we're talking about this, because the Board of Regents would need to expend some money because some support person is going to have to like say, who is your rep? Who is your rep? On the technical colleges and the community colleges. So it's not, it would be within house of spending money. So that sort of money will be expended. But if you do not want these 9 members to be paid, I would suggest that in this type of situation, we would add a proviso that said, and no members shall serve without compensation. And then just to clarify that you don't want them to get mileage either. So they would just serve without any compensation or subsistence.
Body, do you have, or not body, sorry, committee, do you have an opinion on that? Since there's 2 of us sitting here that will be on the committee. Okay, yes, Representative Wessing.
And I think that when we're doing work at the legislature, it should be paid. It's very hard once we leave. It's a citizen legislature. We go back home and we do our work at home. Once you start to interrupt again and keep going back and forth, I just think it's a minor expenditure in that sense. You know, you're talking about 4 meetings. I think it's fair. And disclosure, I'm not on the committee, so I'm not trying to get myself some money. So I just think it's important that we do that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any other discussion? We don't have a motion. Any other thoughts about that? Representative Rajas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will make a motion. I mean, I understand, but I mean, we're doing legislative work and others. I mean, this isn't like 4 guys getting together with a 6-pack and decide the future of education. I mean, that's for another time. So I think, you know, what standard operating procedure is with any legislative committee, working group, and so on. I think that's what we should follow, and I believe it would be any sort of per diem. If you want to give it back to the state in the form of writing a check, general budget, or put it in the pie plate that's in my office from years ago, like collect loose change to help pay for any budget expenditures, you can do that. But that's, you know, I think I would make a motion to, you know, what's the right, I mean, you know, the boilerplate language basically that
I'm understanding that right now there isn't a motion needed. What we have would be sufficient for that. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood. I thank you for that. Thank you for being willing. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have any idea or any estimate on what the total cost would be if we paid the per diem and expenses to the members of the committee?
There's 3 members of the working group that are in the legislature to get paid per day. And and then expenses. So maybe, you know, $3,000 would be about what it is, it looks like. And that would be if we had 4 meetings. I'm optimistic that we can, if we need, the proviso says no more than 4 meetings, so it could be less than that. Any other discussion? Representative Amex.
You, Madam Chair, and I think it's extremely, you know, it's appropriate that the members doing legislative work. People are compensated. This is 3 big out.
Thank you. Representative Riley.
Yes, I would agree as far as if you're going to be doing this outside of session, that should be compensated for that mileage coming up and back. My legislative political ideas, though, that all 4 of those working groups while we perform session, while you still have all these lobbyists and people coming up here, so you wouldn't meet in the summer. That's just a pie in the sky dream. All right, thank you.
Okay, so an interesting point that you just made is this proviso is in the 2023 budget, which would mean after June 30th. I mean, immediately after. I mean, when fiscal year 2023 starts, we could. Is that true?
Sure, I think you're saying.
Right.
Again,
So
I'm not trying. I'm just making a point here that the theory would be that we would have a session next year, and a session next year when we had a gap of a few times, that you would get together with the folks and have that discussion. Gaps in right now. That was just a point.
no, I mean, it's an interesting point. Representative Wassinger.
Well, I think that's a great idea since we have to wait until after. We don't know who will be here next year. It's a fact of life. It's like 52 card pickup. I mean, you just throw it up in the air and you get it back and you're not sure who's going to be here. So I think while we have the intent of the legislature now, we should take advantage of that. Cost it's not spending a lot, but I think you have a really good point. I think it should be followed through with and done instead of waiting and letting a whole other group. So that's just my opinion. But thank you for yours.
Representative Riley.
At the same hand, you are not designating in this bill people. You're designating slots of the chair, ranking member on that committee, not necessarily people. And I am very aware that this group has gained a whole lot of knowledge in 2 years. All I'm saying is even though we're playing 125 card pickup, that this is just a point of discussion. I'm not making a motion, just discussing that some of this could happen before the session. So thank you.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We spent more time on this than we did the 45 million, which is surprising to me, but there are interim committees all the time. This is something that could produce a deliverable that we could, and the next legislature could take up as early as next year. We do something next session, then who knows if they can get something done and report it out and into legislation and passed in time. I was on the Future of Higher Ed Council a few years ago, and we delivered results. Some has turned into legislation. A lot of it has been steps that the Board of Regents has taken proactively at the recommendation of that group. And so I think anytime, especially if it's for a couple $1,000s, we can come up with a long-term solution to this issue, it's worth it. So I hope that we can pass this as it currently is.
Any other discussion? Okay. Representative Nguyen.
Chair. Last sentence says essentially that you will have a report January 9th. So I understand what the representative is talking about, but essentially, if you have a report January 9th, you're going to have action next session. Somebody say, "Could you help me understand what you did last year?"
Yeah. And we have passed this. There's nothing we need to do right now, but my thought is that after June 30th, 2022, when fiscal year 2023 starts, we will have meetings soon, right away, so that we can have the report ready on or before January 9th, 2023. That's what the intention would be. Okay, so I don't think we need to do anything about that, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And I think that was helpful and we got some clarification. There's one other clarification that has to do with, if you all remember, we passed a motion to keep 20 million going into the Board of Regents and saving back 25.7 million to look at an omnibus. Representative Wassinger, did you want to explain or clarify anything there?
It appeared that because of the different discussion, that was confusing on how we wanted that money spent, and I don't think we need to put that in there. So I would like it just to say that we give the Board of Regents at this point 20 million, and then wait for the 25.7 and on. Is that clear? I don't want to say you have to spend it just on this, just on that. What I assumed, when I talked about it, I was making assumptions. It wasn't directly telling them exactly what I.
Representative Woodard.
Madam Chair, whoever wants to answer this question, feel free. So just to clarify, this is 20 million currently in the university operating grants of the Board of Regents. 25 off to omnibus. There's no language about tuition. Is that correct? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions about that? Okay. Any other questions about any of our recommendations? Shirley, would you like to tell us what the committee should expect as far as getting the recommendations and what everyone needs to do?
As with the other budgets that we've heard in this committee, I will write up the subcommittee report and review it with the chair to make sure we have everything correct. And then you will get line copied on an email. That's technically your signature. As we have heard from one member, we have a minority report, which will be attached to it, but you don't have to respond to the email that I send you. It's just providing you a copy of it unless you want to, if you have an edit or a comment or something that you want to bring up that you don't think something's correct. Other than that, it's the same as we've done with all the other budgets.
Okay, and it's a little more involved. As you all remember, we did quite a few things. I mean, I think there'll be about 10 different things. So please do take a look at it. And does anyone have any other questions? Is there anything else from our revisor or research analyst? Okay. Okay, committee, nothing else? Okay, we are planning on meeting next Tuesday to hear some bills that have to do with sales of land or swaps of our universities. We're going to hear all those bills in one day on Tuesday, and we'll work them on Wednesday. So that's what we're doing next week. Okay, thank you. We're adjourned.